Okay, so let's have a chat. This is some really big stuff, and I've been sitting on it for a while, and it's time that I give it to you, the world. So please have an open heart and get ready for this. Now, this comes through what we usually call a channeling, which can be experienced in many different ways, and I'm a bit of a teacher of this sort of stuff. Using different methods and different strategies, you can connect and channel in with many different sources or places or things or beings or times, or even yourself at other points in time and space. So a little bit of a background. I'll explain as best I can as I go through. I'm not going to be able to explain everything, and there are some parts here that hold information that I don't even know yet, but I've left it as best as I can in its raw form. The raw form itself was me in kind of like a trance channeling, so it's very slow and lots of type of bits and pieces in between. But like I said, I'll just get started and I'll do the best I can to explain it as I think I need to as I go through. So to start with, the introduction to this is I was sitting down and I started simply after a bit of a meditation and bringing myself into alignment, connecting each of my chakras and making sure that my core was flowing both up and down, that I was pulling in energy from above and pulling energy up from below, swirling it around in my heart to make sure that that was the focus of the entirety throughout the project. Within this transcendental moment, I started that I reach out and make connection with that it is, which I am. Thank you for your presence here. And then I waited a little bit until I felt it was time. Yes, staring from that ship, some sort of craft overlooking the planet in its assembly point, I'm standing there with everyone, with God, with her, with she. And she says to me, I can't wait to go down there. And I say, it's going to be such a wonderful experience to be able to feel these new heights. We can feel this closeness like never before. I can't wait either. I'm so excited to experience this thing that they call sex. I say simply to her. And she says in reply, yes, well, I know you do. And a few for as you come back, and a few more as you come back to me this time from the other time. When you are here with me right now, you understood. A bit now that you visit me for my future, what you call in the future back into the past to stand with me. You bring with you the flavour of your current moment. And so it seems very peculiar, this conversation, but you'd know within the deepest of your hearts that it's true. It's very confusing, that first bit, and I left that out of my original post because of how confusing it is, but let me explain. As I projected myself and I connected for the purpose of this channeling, I could see myself and feel myself standing on what can only be described as, and these constructs and these words that we use are only in English form. They're not exactly accurate because the English aspect of it eliminates a lot of the actual reality of what's going on, because we have such an inability to accept parts of the universe that are only just becoming new to us now. For the longest time, we've spent our whole civilization focused on what is real and tangible in terms of our physical senses. But as it turns out, the majority of existence exists just beyond the reach of our senses, or in between our senses, or through our senses. Like, not through them as in with them, but in between through them, right? Where the senses can't quite get. And so I'm standing there at the beginning of Earth, watching its construction outside of a window, and I can see it coming together, all the natural forces, the four basic forces, wind, air, fire, water, Earth. And as it's coming together, I'm standing there with this feminine essence, this goddess, which I can only describe as, like I did in the text, the feminine goddess herself, or what would be the essence of the feminine energy within, at the very least, our corner of the universe. All right. Now, I don't focus too much on her identity because it's very clear to me that she doesn't have one, that she is it all, including that feminine essence inside of me. And for any one of you women out there, this might very well be your higher self in a way. All right. She says to me, as you come back to me this time from the other time, as in she knows that I'm projecting back to her from the time that I'm coming from. When you are here with me right now, she knows that I'm also there with her at that moment. But it's at that moment that I understand. Whereas in the future, I'm having trouble understanding. But now that you visit me from my future, what you call the future back into the past, to stand with me, you bring the flavor of your current moment. So as I'm coming back into the past to stand with her at this point of creation, I'm bringing with her my pain and suffering and confusion through my humanity into that moment where it previously had never been. So I'm bringing a point of creation through time and space into a pre-existent time where it wasn't actually present. And that was an interesting concept. But she goes on to say, and so it seems very peculiar, this conversation, but you'd know within the deepest of your hearts that it's true. Then I go on to the part that I first posted about on my wall. She says to me, this thing that you call love, this experience, this connection, this fire, is the same no matter where you find it. But it is within your illusion that the game is where you find it. And this is how you get to express or experience it or play with it. For the love itself is both separation and coming together. It is the up and the down, the good and the bad. More correctly, she goes on, it is the dance between the two. So it's not one or the other, it's the dance between the two, the movement. So I reply, I know, and I see this now, that thing that we call suffering, that moment of bitterness that taints every goodbye, that is behind every moment of love and missing and longing, and my heart is breaking as I read this. She returns, seeking and craving, desiring and pursuing, sooner or later that direction has to reverse. This is often referred to as suffering. Is that direction changing in reverse? If you can't experience that within your awareness. What do you mean? I ask. See, the pain and suffering is a lot more than you're consciously aware of. You're very desensitized where you find yourself. After all this time, the collective trauma, the pain, before you stepped foot in this place, the planet Earth, before you left me, her, where we are right now, and descended down there, this thing that you look for, this thing that you run from, this thing that you hold and nurture, and this thing you sweep away and discard. It is all exactly the same. And that's the end of the first post that I made on my wall. The second post goes on straight from there and says, so with this I say, is the dance and the connection and that thing that we call life. It then gives purpose and meaning to the experience that we have. That's a question. This is correct, she says. The first moment that you all came down to here, the first moment that this all started was, but nothing was needed for that nothing, which had to be something. Within that nothing was the illusion that it was something, because actually nothing had changed. It had somehow begun to explore and begin to multiply the distance that it had traveled. Traveled is in, I have to emphasize that traveled is meant as in human context, not actually, it wasn't actually traveling. Multiplications that are multiplied, fractals at all scales, is more relative to how it traveled. It traveled in spirit, not in distance and physicality. Each one of these created much more experience and much more, as they say, dukkha, which for those that don't know, is defined as a Sanskrit word commonly translated as suffering, unhappiness, pain, unsatisfactoriness, or stress. So each one of these created much more experience, much more dukkha. Each fractal and each scale, each multiplied multiplication creates much more suffering, unhappiness, pain, and stress. Pain and she goes on, pain and suffering and turmoil, i.e. hardness, I've added that in, to help with the understanding. But she goes on to help, and that after a certain amount of time, and I've added experience, after a certain amount of hotness, in this context she's referring to that as pain, suffering, and turmoil, creates the need for softness to come back out again. Pain and suffering and turmoil to help, and that after a certain amount of time, after a certain amount of hotness, creates the need, the softness to come back out again. As the softness washes back over, it warps the edges down, bluntens the corners, brings together the opposites that start rigidly apart for a harmonic play that everything needs to move. Before we could even begin to help, as in anything else that is out there, and not what we would call physically here in creation. Before we could even begin to help, you first had to know how to hurt and how to love. This is your past and your history. This is humanity, and this experience of infliction, judgment, pain, and suffering is also the precursor to say, I love this. We then pick up on the constant pain and that constant as in they, anything outside of here. They pick up on this constant pain and constant suffering, and it starts off with small individuals who begin to flip their polarity, seeing that the pain and the suffering, seeing it and deciding to bring it back together, and in doing so create a flood that washes back over everything as it is brought back to the center again. Nothing is lost. Their whole remains in ways and forms, but your tiny being can't stand that yet, and that's partially why you're able to be here with me. Continuous as the things come back together again, they start to begin to reach up to the next levels. Yes, to this pain. Yes, to the suffering. It is no longer pain and suffering though. It is the compassion and love forged from the depths of hell, ready to ascend directly to the heights of the otherwise unknown. And it has become hardened, rigid, and is appropriately moving and appropriately secured at the same time, using the loving embrace of that fluid emotion and that fluid connection that flows forth like a geyser to gather and assemble in harmony, ready for the reach out into a new level of pain and suffering, to begin the scale of growth again, claiming effort more towards that source point, towards that light. And that's the end of the second one. Before I go on to the third one, at the very start of number 2 there, I'll add the text here, or add a link to the text in some form or shape, but it's also available on my wall, and I'll add a direct reference to that as well, so that way you've got this in any form that you need to be able to see it. But I want to run over this small part again. The first moment that you all came down here, the first moment that this all started, was but nothing was needed for that nothing, as in that name nothing. At first, nothing was needed for that nothing, which is something. Within itself was the illusion that it was something, because actually nothing had changed. And if you have not heard of any of this sort of stuff before, this correlates directly with the first principle within the Hermetic philosophy, which is that the all is like the mind, that we are all thoughts dancing within a greater thought itself. And that's the very reason why energy is a main part of existence, and the matter of physicality is but an illusion. And we know this now scientifically through many different avenues and through many different places. Okay, now this is not the type of science that they promulgate on TV, because they don't like you to realize that the secret to happiness is not found within material possession. Material possession is all about the control factor within our society. It's the thing that pushes you to go out and buy and to consume, and to finally, after all is said and done, turn around sitting on empires of gold and possessions and sit there and go, well, this sucks, because it's all energy. Moving on to point 3, part 3. This one took me a while to get the guts up to bring out to you today, because, well, get ready. So as I go on from the last one, she finishes explaining how pain and suffering is literally the thing that, pain is the only thing that exists, and through pain, love, compassion, and understanding come. You can't have love, compassion, and understanding without pain. It doesn't happen. There is a level of reality to this, and I've been thinking about this for many years, as many people do, but this is the counterforce that creates the tension of our reality for us to exist within. Okay, gravity versus, however you want to word it, the in and the out, the up and the down. Both forces are needed to create a harmonic of balance, and we dance between the two of them, and she explains that in more detail. Moving on, this is me, standing where I am now in this place with you on this spaceship, overlooking on this, the Earth, and being down there on the Earth at the same time, experiencing this from this perspective, as in from up here, and from that perspective down there. I'm so grateful to be able to see that I can't see. So as a human, if I turn around and I say, when do I see you again, will you just laugh at me? So as I'm saying this, I was sitting there on the chair, meditating, in trance, looking down at the planet, while also looking back up at the same time. And it was this complete figure eight of energetic exchange between the two parts of reality, of myself and its self. Reality is a thing and it is very alive. So as a human, if I turn around and I say, when do I see you again? You'll just laugh at me, won't you? And she says to me with a smile, that's only because it hasn't stopped. As in to say, how can I see you again if I'm seeing you forever and you're seeing me forever? It's still there, she goes on, in all its form and shape, and that's the reason why you can still experience it, still feel it in your heart. That is the point of your creation. It's a connection that you have to and through it all, just like everyone else. You're all time-traveling creatures spread across space and time throughout existence. This is what she's talking about. But she goes on, this fixing that you're obsessed about is exactly the same. This fixing is in getting rid of the bad, fixing the evil. Observe the bird outside in the morning. There are many people who consider sex to be as painful and annoying, just like some might see that bird. I laughed at that for obvious reasons. There are those who experience heights, and seeing the truth of that bird in its analogy, there's some who also plough the depths of one another. Here she's talking about those who willfully do wrong and know that they're doing wrong and accept the consequences of that. And yes, your mind, I'm thinking at this point, I didn't even get a chance to ask the question. I should have, because I can't remember exactly what it was. And yes, your mind is correct that this is the assumption and the conclusion behind what your sexuality is. It is a traumatic response to this thing that you call an externalization of it. In the image of another, an item of some kind, this experience or that. If you don't know about the secrets behind what makes us sexually attracted to other people and other things, then have a look into Carl Jung and the sexuality of shadow work. Sexual love is the exact same as every other love. Yeah. Except from that inverted perspective, a trauma response. The pain and suffering suddenly, when viewed from one perspective, that is incorrect. Pain paves the way for creation, connection, and further establishment. This, your great Rumi has said amongst others, pain is where the light comes in. First, there has to be separation before you can come back home. First, there has to be suffering before you can realize what you're suffering for. Once it is returned in its rightful manner, not through possession or obsession, then it is transcendent and evolutionary as it is with your sex, how it creates new life in ways you don't even fathom. If you can achieve this in this human form, in whatever manner, shape or form, between any two parts ritually opposite to each other, then that is what you will bring forth. From within will save you. That which you do not bring forth will, of course, destroy you. That which you outreach for will always be out of your reach. But that which you reach in for will bring with it all of creation. Is there anything else? And I simply say, for this moment, I am just grateful. Thank you. And then I opened my eyes. Once it is returned in its rightful manner, not through possession or obsession, then it is transcendent and evolutionary as it is with your sex, how it creates new life. If you can achieve this in human form in whatever manner or shape between any two parts that are ritualistically opposite, then that which you bring forth from that union of those two will save you. This is not just in one instance or two, but this is a secret of how we move forward as a human race. How do we fight the shadow on the planet? How do we fight those that we label as bad? How do we stop the things that are ill from happening when our opposition to them make them a reality, give them strength? If we side with one or the other, we're joining the war. We're doing the same thing again and again and again. I'm right and you're wrong. I bring this to you today because I realize that the longer that I sit on this, and I've been sitting on it for a few months now, the more it eats away inside of me as pain in itself, because there are many of you out there who are suffering in one form or another, in family and relationships with partners, with children, with society, with doctors, with medical issues, psychological, physical. In one way or another, we need to find how these things come together and eliminate in their union one another. And when we do that, art is brought forward, creation comes bursting forth through that union of the divine. Once we realize that the two poles are one part of the same thing, then we're in a position where we can actually be divine here on this planet. There is a lot here that I keep coming back to just for a read of my own every now and then, and I just blow up every time in a good way over how amazing this is. And I can't emphasize it enough that you should have a listen to this quite often and have a read of this quite often, because it holds within it the secret and the answer to all of the problems that exist in your life right here. Not to mention the planet again. Interestingly enough, I also want to just take a moment to address the subject on the sexual attraction aspect, because that's a big thing in our world today. And it causes a lot of grief and suffering, causes a lot of agitation and anger. And anyone who loves anyone in any capacity does not want to see them violated in any shape or form. But when they're sexually violated over physically violated, that takes it to a whole new level. I'm not saying that the answer here is to eliminate our beliefs around whether or not people should or shouldn't be sexually violated. That is clearly not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying here is, in the smallest way, for you to understand, I want you to take this away. When you feel pain, when you feel suffering, especially over the pain of somebody else or the crime of somebody else against somebody else, remember that that shows you how much you also love at the same time. Every time you are where you are and you experience some pain, that also indicates that your level of love is above that. Okay? And we need to shift our focus from the pain to the love. And this is done through what is actually referred to as our reticular activation system. Our reticular activation system is a complex process of information gathering and processing in between the parts of our mind and our body that basically say to our frontal processing what is and what isn't what we want to pay attention to. I hear people all the time say, I'm sick of loving this, or I'm sick of trusting. No, we're not. We're not sick of loving. We love loving. We love trusting. We love reaching out to other people. We love connection. What we're sick of is the pain and the suffering, not the love. The love is not painful. The love is love, and it is fucking-tastic in all its forms. Don't mix it up in your own mind. Don't try to run from it, because running from it is going to get you in the opposite direction to it. And for the very thing that we're all chasing, love and connection, that's a very important lesson. I am here as love for every one of you, for everyone out there, and for everything out there. Because that's what I am, is love. In all forms, in all levels, and in all shapes that I possibly can manifest within my limited form at this current point in time. And so, as always, unlimited magic and infinite love to you and everyone that is around you. Well, I'll be talking a lot more about this, and like I said, I'll have more information on the post, and I'll post links and stuff like that. But for now, thank you for listening. Please share this message because it is really important. Blessings.